I watched Matty Healy's recent interview with Joshua Citarella, so you do not have to. And initially I was so excited, two incredible wordsmiths coming together to hopefully cover interesting topics. There was themes of neoliberalism, the institutionalization of art. I was so excited. I was like, oh wow, they're going to cover some really interesting concepts here. And maybe this will be a really thought-provoking discussion. But oh no, it was so disappointingly lackluster. What it actually came to was two people, Joshua and Matty, just saying how great they thought each other were, and never actually challenging how either of them came to the conclusions they did. Throughout like the whole interview, they mentioned bands are dead, and Joshua even said that Matty's music deserves to be in some sort of art gallery. It's real art. It's something to behold and for all of us to see. Which is hilarious because Matty also says in this interview, I don't like doing interviews with the mainstream press because he's not interested in it, he's not about it. But this whole thing just seemed like one big sales pitch for, look how cool Matty Healy is. Matty Healy is back. He's gonna do some more Matty Healy stuff. You're amazing, Matty Healy. Bands are dead. Nobody's doing it like you. Subculture's dead. It's being fully commodified. Let's just completely forget that the hardcore scene revival in the UK has been absolutely crazy. I'm gonna ignore that. Matty Healy, the only one doing it. For real, for real. You crazy, Matty Healy. You're amazing. It was really disappointing, but at base level, it sounds amazing because they use so many cool big words. I was like, whoa, they must be really thinking about things and talking about things, right? No, there was no depth, just two men telling each other how great they thought each other were. All whilst calling out Punk, also calling out YungBlud again, and just showing how really disillusioned and disconnected they were from active subculture spaces. Goodness, do we have an interesting conversation on our hands today. And if you're new here, let me introduce myself. My name is Cal, and on this channel, we do videos talking about things we see on the internet, and then we all discuss it as a community down in the comments section below, all sharing our different views and opinions on the subject matter. So if that sounds like fun for you, please feel free to subscribe. We're always trying to beat this here ratio. Yeah, and if you're not new here, hello, it's great to have you back on the channel. Let's just dive straight into this conversation of Matty Healy, his claims of the death of subcultures, and why he chooses to continue to dig at YungBlud. Throughout this video, I'll be directly quoting from Joshua and Matty's interview. I can't show the clips because the video will just probably get taken down for copyright issues. But what kind of kicked off the whole inspiration for me making this video was what happened at around 4 minutes 26 into Matty and Joshua's interview. Matty says, as soon as something is alternative, it becomes immediately corrupted by the mainstream. He then goes on to say he doesn't want to single anybody out, but it becomes glaringly obvious who he's talking about. He says there's this new scene on TikTok of these very overtly alternative artists, in the way that we would describe somebody who's gone to Hot Topic. And we are in this weird place where for their young audience, they are presenting these ideas and aesthetics, you know, chains, skirts, and doing that, being alternative in the same way we were 50 or 40 years ago. And they are basically presenting authenticity as just another commodity or aesthetic. He also points out how they're all like, F the man, but all signed to Island Records. This is just a big point out at YungBlud. Matty famously dislikes YungBlud. A few years ago, Matty went on Instagram and did a story doing an impression of YungBlud.
I'm so fucking angry because someone's blown themselves up in the fucking in the Ukraine, and we're not gonna stand for that because we're the fucking children. The fucking underrated youth fucking generation, and that's what we stand for. Well, I don't stand for stuff. I stand against stuff. There's not a particular thing that I stand for. I just stand against stuff, and it tends to be the most morally obvious stuff. You know, like that everyone stands for. Fuck the patriarchy.
And unfortunately, this kind of just set the tone for the whole rest of the interview. Someone that really hated the modern day evolution of social media. He hates TikTok. He thinks it represents a sheer commodification of art and expression. And I think this was a real shame to hear because Matty was an iconic user of Tumblr. The original 1975 movement, when it was getting big, was known for the stuff it was doing on Tumblr. So it's a shame to hear an artist poop on other artists who are just using the latest digital outlet that youth culture is using to communicate to each other. And what becomes glaringly obvious is how just disinterested Matty is in actually understanding what subculture spaces look like now and engaging with them. And what is just a further shame of this person that maybe was once in the subculture spaces just completely rejecting them and just like taking a big steamy poop on what they are now, is in this interview of Matty when he was younger, he was like, he comes from like punk music and hardcore music, where the idea was you were going to change the world. So it just seems so disconnected that Matty would come on and just bash the newer waves of subcultures and younger artists who are expressing themselves online just the way Matty did 10 years ago. And while Matty's perspectives are very provocative, they really do reveal a deep disconnection between his view of contemporary culture and the reality experienced by youth today. And with that, that brings us on to our first talking point: the commercial co-opting of alternative culture and authentic punk. And I just do want to say a reminder that if you have listened to Matty's interview, this is not me refuting everything he says and saying it's all wrong. The whole 2.5-hour conversation with Joshua is littered with many truths, however I feel incorrect conclusions, often offering very simple answers to complex, nuanced questions. But the way Matthew and Joshua discussed these questions, such as art and bands and music and subculture spaces, was in absolutes rather than questioning one another, which I feel led both of them astray from the reality of subculture currently. So yeah, Matty comes out swinging out the gates and basically says that TikTok punk is completely commercialized and there's nothing real going on there. He's very quick to basically position himself against figures like YungBlud, who he believes represents this diluted version of punk aimed at the mainstream, aimed at the masses. I just want to be quick to point out that YungBlud does not claim he's punk, and I feel this is not me being like a big YungBlud fanboy. I don't resonate with his music. I don't think I'm the target audience, but I do think YungBlud is something very good for youth culture. And I think that's where Matty's first real big issue lies. He completely misunderstands youth appeal. His very dismissive view overlooks how artists like YungBlud's music, despite commercial success, resonates with younger audiences and also fosters a very inclusive environment. Honestly, it's lovely to see. Although, like I said, I'm clearly not the target audience. It's clearly for people a little bit younger than me. And that's no issue, by the way, if you do still resonate with YungBlud, if you are older than me or whatever. I'm just saying his core demographic will typically be teens exploring probably the very beginnings of the alternative world. But he really does champion creating safe places for all and trying to empower members of his community that may be marginalized or may feel like they're an outcast to society. And rather than just acknowledging YungBlud's popularity and just being like, yeah, I don't really get it, or maybe I'm just not the demographic, maybe I'm just a little bit too old for it, he has to poop on artists like this and just be like, yeah, they're just stating the obvious, they're not really doing anything, which is very dismissive of Matty Healy and comes off far more as a personal critique than an objective view of alternative culture today. And it shows Matty Healy's real lack of understanding of youth culture and his disconnect to it. Which is wild, because in this 2.5-hour interview, they talk so much of social media and how they use it. Matty literally says at the 1.5-hour mark, "We for a start went on an American tour, which 10 years ago couldn't have happened because people wouldn't have heard of our music if it wasn't for the internet. We went and we played these shows in America, and what we'd do every day in the Tumblr Instagram era was take a Tumblr-y or Instagram-y photo of the environment we were in." So to me, this is just another example of Matty's disconnect. He in 1975 was once this up-and-coming band using modern-day social media outlets to promote his band, using the tools he had available. And that is just what I feel a lot of artists are doing on TikTok now. But for Matty, it feels disingenuine or unauthentic. Why is it if you spend so much time on understanding meme culture and all these other buzzwords you brought up, why is it you are so disconnected to understanding what youth culture actually wants? As your dismissal of modern figures as unauthentic, all whilst being very mainstream yourself, I feel what that does do is it reflects the inability to see how youth culture today expresses its alternative values, especially online, especially on apps like TikTok, video-based apps. I find it kind of annoying. Of course, things on TikTok are going to be very visual based. People throwing up signs, people saying big statement words. TikTok is a short form app. I do not expect people to monologue and do 2.5-hour rants on there. That would make no sense. So for an artist or for someone in the punk community to come online and just show a little bit of that community and show a little bit of that subculture makes way more sense. They're not going to be giving complete answers to very big overarching questions of what does authenticity look like in a TikTok, are they? That's just silly hee ha-has. And this reminds me of like the historical thing of older generations who have often misunderstood the newer waves of alternative culture, which in turn makes Matty Healy's critiques seem so out of touch. He now unfortunately just seems like someone that refuses to get with or even attempt to understand the new needs of youth culture today. And I think an example of where that becomes glaringly obvious now, how maybe once upon a time Matty was really switched on and he got what youth culture wanted, but now there's this real disconnect between him and the new wave of youths coming up, is at 55 minutes into the interview, he says, "In 2009, when all the record labels, the institutions were coming to see us, they were confused because I would play them Chocolate, we'd play like 4 songs that sounded totally different, and they'd be like, I don't get it. And I'd be like, but my generation will. They will just inherently understand it." And I think that's beautiful. Someone that's so interconnected with youth culture that they knew that's what the youths want, and they did. Songs like Chocolate were such a huge success, and I remember the first day of college listening to that on repeat while I was waiting for the bus, being so nervous, but having this song that just captured teenage angst, it just resonated with me in a really nice way. The beat, the sound. Seeing this fall from grace of someone just being like, I don't like the new stuff on TikTok. It's all just too visual. It's too obvious stimulation. It's not real. It's inauthentic. It seems like a very throwaway approach without actually looking at what's really going on there. Communities rebuilding themselves, coming alive, new stuff happening. But no, just because you see the fashion trends and you see it as, oh, it's just people copying the OG punks from the 70s with the spiky hair and the leather jackets, it's inauthentic. Again, silly Billy hee hee ha ha. There are many punks that do like to express themselves in that Vivian Westwood-esque way, which is typically associated with the commercialized aesthetic of punk, yes. But there are also as many who still may be dressed up as that commercialized concept of punk, but are still championing the core value, challenging the status quo. And I think that's important to note. And that is not me just denying that there are no issues in subculture spaces online on TikTok. Yes, it is facing the same problems it's always had, as people just taking it as being an option for just some big sort of fashion show, very much form over substance, looking the part but not acting the part. But this is a problem that's been going on in subcultures since the beginning of subcultures, since the beginning of these counterculture activities. That's always been an issue. So always like to just put it all on TikTok being like this vapid place where nothing good happens is a very shallow, easy answer to a complex question of what does authenticity in subcultures look like in the modern day world. And it is very real and it's very alive. You just have to actively look and not just go for like the top most liked video under, I don't know, the hashtag punk. It's all there if you want to learn, my friend. And I found this very interesting. Two people talking about subculture spaces with so much confidence, but a lot of it felt under-researched. And this brings me on to my second point. Band music is dead. At multiple times throughout the interview, both Matty and Joshua allude to band music just being dead. There's no new bands. Nobody's doing it like you, Matty. I'm not kidding you. Joshua hypes Matty up as this sort of like godly creation that's come down to make bands great again. At 56 minutes 23, Matty literally says, I was like, what can I do that other people can't right now? I was like, we've been in a band for 20 years. Maybe just like being in a band is actually quite revolutionary. Because there are no bands. I roll my eyes, my head falls into my hands. Matty is somebody who comes up with the most interesting ideas and concepts when he's challenged, not when he's just told he's great. Because then he just smiles and he's like, yeah, I am good, aren't I? It's just, come on. I'm not denying Matty can make some interesting points. He's incredibly talented. He's a very, very talented wordsmith. But all this is doing is just blowing smoke up him and just further giving him a confirmation bias for facts that are not true. And you could see it was working because he became more and more confident to just be like, yeah, there are no new bands. originality's dead. And by like the hour and a half mark, yeah, he was basically saying he's the only band doing what he's doing. And this really annoyed me because these statements that band music is dead, there's no incentive to be a band anymore, actually just discredits the real subcultures, you know, the real thriving ones like the hardcore scene and the DIY punk scene, which are experiencing huge resurgence currently. And this is not me just trying to hype them up. No, there is. The community aspect there is wild. If Matty just looked at the hardcore scene, he would see its true vibrancy. There's events and shows being put on all over the UK. The UK is currently like a hotspot for this. So the fact that Matty, an English lad who also claims to have hardcore roots, is not looking into any of this, just shows how like truly integrated he is into the mainstream. This man that pits himself against it all. He's against all the institutions, has fully institutionalized himself. He's part of it. He's just now another corporate machine, a corporate baddie. Wee woo, wee woo. You are everything you hate and you don't realize, unfortunately. These events that aren't relying on any sort of commercial backing. And what this does is it completely contradicts Matty Healy's sweeping statements. And this really suggests to me that Matty Healy's perspective is now so skewed by his own experience in the mainstream. He's been so much a part of the mainstream culture in music and sound now for so long. He's probably not really to any degree actually interacting with subculture spaces. But why would you expect him to? He's a mainstream baddie. He's a sellout. And wait, no, that generally sounded rude. I don't mean like a sellout as in like he sold his soul, because I know he's got his own record label and stuff. I just mean like he sells out stadiums. He's a big performing artist. So his world will be shaped by that instead of, you know, engaging with like subculture spaces. There's no incentive for him to. I do really urge you to watch and listen to the interview, because there are many interesting points and truths in the conversation. There's many things that are correct. There's good observations. However, I cannot shake the feeling that it's two very similar brilliant minds coming together to just remind themselves how brilliant they are, rather than actually challenging each other or being actually interconnected with any of the things they're talking about. There's one point in the interview where Joshua basically says to Matty, his music and his music videos and his performances and how he does like plays in the middle of his performances at shows is incredible. There's nobody doing it like Matty and his band. They're revolutionary. That's the only band he can think of that's ever done something like that. And I think that's a shame, because it's not true. There's many bands that do these artistic expressions throughout their music. It's not uncommon. I just think of like 21 Pilots, who have created so much lore around it, like literal lore. They've done so much story building and lore building around their albums, the characters they've made. These artistic expressions are not unique to the 1975. Another example of Matty just not being aware of subcultures is around the 1 hour mark. He even admits basically not knowing what subcultures look like now, and yet he generalizes about subcultures' death. I feel rather than exploring these scenes and actually trying to understand them and understand how they're using apps like TikTok to operate and to connect with like-minded individuals, he's doing the dangerous thing and skewing his opinion by staying on the sidelines, theorizing about their demise. And this stance is clearly making him seem very out of touch with youth-driven music movements. It's kind of throwing your hands up and being like, I don't get it. If you're not doing it my way, it's not real, it's not authentic. If you're not on Tumblr, man, sharing some abstract pictures, it's not real. Because you're on TikTok being loud and creating some noise, I don't like it, it's inauthentic. Boo, hiss, boo. Zooey mama. And that brings me on to my next talking point of like gatekeeping art and creativity. An elitist take on expression. At around the 16-minute mark, Matty suggests that only certain people get art. And this, of course, is a very gatekeeping perspective that, in all honesty, just felt super elitist to me. He complains about people taking his jokes too seriously, yet condemns YungBlud for resonating with a broader audience. And I feel this double standard exposes a real flaw in Matty Healy's views. If art is subjective, then why can't YungBlud's music and the way he conducts himself to his audience also be valued as art too? This is a complete contradiction to Matty's message. By insisting that sometimes his art is misunderstood by his fans, his audience, and by the wider public, yet openly critiquing others in the same conversation. Punks online that are just saying and doing the most obvious things, boo, hiss, boo. What he is doing by doing all of this is suggesting he's somehow above public misinterpretation. Come on, Matty Healy. Sometimes it felt in this interview that Matty's frustrations with people misinterpreting his messages, maybe in his performances, and some of the stuff he does online seems like a real excuse for his own failures to communicate his intentions effectively. Instead of accepting that art is always going to be interpreted differently, he places the blame on the audience. And that's a shame. It's Matty's way or the highway. Is that the phrase? It's my way or the highway? Yeah, it is. Got him. Totally got him there. Time and time again throughout the interview, he makes these subtle digs where he's clearly annoyed that he doesn't resonate with youth culture like he did. But I think that's totally okay. Matty Healy is 35 years old, and by no means in the grand scheme of thing are you an old age pensioner at that point. You're not like a OAP, an old age person. You are, however, getting into like the middle age of your life, 35. And with that, I wouldn't expect you, nor do I put any pressure on you to truly be able to relate and understand youth culture. The same way as myself. I am 27. I do not understand and relate to a lot of the things I see, the subculture spaces doing now, the younger people coming up. But I don't pretend to or feel the need to try and really get it and try and relate to it too, because that always, I feel, just comes across inauthentic and weird. If I'm like, yeah, I'm so totally getting this one. Let's skibbity on that DIY gig. Am I right? Phantom tax. Pipe it up. Like, see, it's just I'm just old at this point. In like, compared to like the young people coming up now in the spaces, I am old. You are old. We're considered like elders of subculture spaces, and it's okay. It's embrace it. It's fine. I think you've got to let the young people coming in take over and spearhead new advancements in subculture spaces. But that doesn't mean they're wrong or doing things inauthentically. You just kind of let people crack on and express themselves in their authentic manner, and maybe be there to offer a couple history lessons occasionally about things and why the things became the way they did. But other than that, Matty Healy's getting older, so I assume the audience he would appeal to is getting older, and that's fine. Also, he's experienced such a high level of success right now in the mainstream. He can pretty much pump out whatever and people will listen to it. And they'll pretend to get it because it's Matty Healy. They'll be like, this is so cool and amazing. And that's fine, Matty. You can do your thing. You'll always have a big audience now because you're that boy band. You're the ones that should be in an art gallery. Yeah, anyways. Less we talk about Josh saying Matt deserves to be in an art gallery, the better. But, people are always going to tune in. It's totally okay. I personally believe YungBlud, and though I would probably rather listen to Matty Healy's music, probably. I don't know. I don't really listen to either too much. But I personally believe YungBlud does a far better job at relating and understanding youth culture than Matty Healy. I think Matty Healy does a great job at maybe appealing to people who operate within the mainstream alternative world. And by that, I mean they actually don't participate in actual alternative spaces like the hardcore scene, the punk scene, or whatever, those DIY scenes. But that kind of like mainstream alternative space that maybe once listened to YungBlud and now, as they're getting older, are coming into Matty Healy. Maybe. That's just a theory. I could be wrong. But that's just a guess. I have no expectations of Matty Healy getting or understanding youth culture, but it's annoying when he comes online and speaks with such absolutes and truths about things he doesn't truly understand. If you just took Matty's words as literal gospel, you would assume the hardcore scene's dead. There's no new bands up and coming. There's no new sounds being made. There's no new music tech. Everything's dead. He's the only one doing it like him. No other bands are doing artistic performances on stage. It's just such a skewed view on the world. And Joshua acts as the catalyst or the yes man in this interview to just further confirm Matty's misguided views on subculture and the musical space currently. Also, like, with the discussions of Matty perhaps no longer resonating with younger audiences anymore, that also brings me on to my next talking point of like nostalgia goggles and just the fear of progress. Throughout the whole interview, Matty constantly criticizes the current state of music, saying, the things like, there's no new bands, the culture is dead. Back in my day, if you wanted to be a goth punk or emo, you had to go out there and actually engage with them. Now you can just do it all online. It's poses, none of it's real. And doesn't this just feel like just how he made fun of, at the very beginning of the interview, new young punks coming through and dressing up as punks from the 70s. Matty is now adopting the same ideologies as people older than him that probably when they first heard Matty's sound, they're like, I don't get it. I don't get why he's doing it like this. It's a self-fulfilling prophecy. It's that vicious cycle that will continue forever and ever and ever. New youth culture coming in, the original cool guys of their generations getting older and no longer understanding the the new youth culture and the disconnect between them. But this new youth culture isn't meant for this person. So Matty isn't meant for that youth culture, and that youth culture is not meant for Matty. They're meant for different demographics, and that's fine. It's so clear to see that Matty Healy feels so disillusioned with the new trends on, apps like TikTok, these very visual-based apps, purely because he just does not understand them. He does not understand how the youth of today interconnect with each other and engage with one another. He doesn't understand that online you can have these very real interactions and have very real communities, and that subcultures like punk and goth and the hardcore scene all use social media to connect to one another, so they know when the next hardcore, festival is, so they know when the next DIY event is. It's all there to interconnect each other. It's not this just cesspit of posers or whatever you want to call them, Matty. There's real authentic things going on there. And yes, I do not deny that in the modern day world, subcultures are more co-opted and commercialized than ever. Yes, sure. But this has always been an issue, and the subcultures and the members of within them that are authentic will always fight that. It's as simple as that. This will go on forever and ever and ever. Matty, to me at this point, just sounds like the uncle at the party, unfortunately, was just the bad takes because they're not actually that involved in the modern world anymore. And that's not to say he won't make good music. I'm sure he will. He's very, very... I'm not ever trying to discredit his ability to make music. He's very good at packaging quirky music for the mainstream. You can tell Matty has a real nostalgia for past music culture, how he used Tumblr to interact with his fans, how he would just upload random abstract pictures and as a way to connect with the fans. But what this does is it completely ignores that the fans nowadays want to use apps like TikTok to discover and engage with the new artists in their own ways. Unfortunately, it really just is as simple as it's that old age disconnect. Much of Matty Healy's resistance and his opinions sounds like one big, oh, I'm scared of progress. And this unfortunately is a sentiment common with older artists. It's like any time you see Morrissey near a microphone and he's not singing, you're like, okay, let's unplug that. He's gonna say something silly, and not silly haha, silly weird. Rather than wanting to adapt or learn, or should I say just accept the modern day alternative youth culture and how they may choose to consume art on, say, mediums like TikTok, he dismisses it. It's wrong. It's not right. It's all too literal. There's no art there. It's not real. And I think this just shows the generational divide. Truthfully, I think it does. And that, unfortunately, undermines his argument. He refuses to see it through the lens of someone younger, or even just to try and understand it. Like I said earlier in this video, he doesn't have to get it and he doesn't have to do it, but almost just accepting it or just trying to consider it from their view. TikTok is their Tumblr. This is what they're being exposed to. This is what they're using. And I know there's like a countercultural response now where lots more people are using Tumblr and it's actually a really fun place to be again. But TikTok is still like a big powerhouse. And that's where people are going to engage with content. Just because it's loud and gets to the point very quickly doesn't mean it's inauthentic or still not an artistic expression. People are just using the tools they have now to operate within this landscape as artists. Nothing wrong there. That's okay. We don't have to fear change. We don't always have to even always get it. We can just be like, okay, cool. The young people are doing the thing and that's fine. Like I said, I'm considered old in the alternative spaces now. That is fine. I don't care. I don't have to get everything, nor do I have to be like, yeah, I'm getting amongst that. I'm just like, fair enough. Do your thing. As long as it's not problematic or like weird, it's fine. It doesn't need to be called out. You don't need to hate on it. There doesn't need to be any animosity about it. It truly can be as simple as that. You don't have to like go on a 2.5 hour rant about how art is now dead and how everything's dead and how you're the only ones doing it real, because that just makes it seem like so self-masturbatory and cringe, which is what this whole interview felt like. Truly it did. Two dudes just being like, yeah, you're awesome. No, have I told you you're awesome? Well, you deserve to be in a museum. No, God. Why no pushback? Why no, oh, so how did you come to that thought? Or what made you think that? It was just, whoa, you're a genius. No, you're incredible. We must do more together. This is amazing. It's a shame. It's two very clearly very book smart people who just gave each other huge confirmation bias to everything they said. Like, yeah, you're right. It's like, oh, okay. I am slightly aware by this point because I had like hundreds and hundreds of quotation notes for this video, that if it feels kind of disconnected and you're not truly resonating with what I'm saying, I do urge you to watch the interview, and then maybe when you come back you'll understand some of the things I'm saying more. I just had so many notes around this, like it's all flooded my brain, and I'm just trying to like get all my thoughts out there in like one big conscious thought within a thought within a thought. It's like thoughtception out here, but there's just so much to talk about. Another big issue I had with like Matty Healy and like almost how he like pokes at the subculture spaces and, you know, artists like YungBlud, is how he also talks about how everybody's an activist now. He gets onto this rant about everybody's doing activism, everybody's trying to change the world, everybody's trying to do a thing. Yes, Matty, that's a good thing. It doesn't make them an activist, by the way. Sharing a post doesn't make you an activist. Going to a few protests doesn't make you this sort of like Greta Thunberg type changing the world human. You're just being an engaged human. That's all it is. I don't get all this hate on people trying to share stuff. If the people want to share stuff, it's fine. What Matty Healy is doing is he's dismissing modern day activism as this shallow performative thing. And whilst performative activism is a real issue, you know, it's a thing, that there's a conversation there, a separate conversation to be had, his blanket statements about activism and how people conduct themselves online really just overlooks how the internet has actually empowered many young individuals to actively engage with social justice issues and share them on their platforms, giving voices to more people, raising awareness on things. And that is fundamentally a good thing. It's a net benefit to society. Just because you may roll your eyes and think, oh, someone's sharing this thing now, it's still good that that's being put out there, because now it's in the back of your mind that you'll be like, oh, okay, I remember I saw that post and I saw that post. There's literally no harm with people sharing posts. And I think what it does show is Matty does not value the small actions of the things everyday people can do. You know, sharing posts on their story, something very simple everybody can do if they want to do, is a lot of people's entry points into activism. The same way YungBlud might be somebody's entry point into an actual subculture space. YungBlud does not claim to be punk. I don't think he actually thinks he's like actively in any of the DIY scenes. He is just like a mainstream artist that just so happens to dress somewhat alternative. It's fine. Matty Healy's just outright cynicism really does just fail to consider that social media activism is, for many, a form of expression and a stepping stone towards larger change. Once again, this just feels like his disconnected understanding of how social media can really empower and mobilize the youth and make them more aware of what's going on in the world. To conclude on this, because I think this is a real interesting conversation where I think our community will have lots of different views and opinions on this, and rightfully so, because this is a very subjective conversation. To me, Matty Healy really does feel like the disconnected critic, an artist who undeniably once broke boundaries, but now seems incredibly disconnected from the scene he claims to critique. I truly feel his nostalgia for the past and reluctance to embrace change, or at least attempt to understand it, reveal a disconnect from the younger generations, who, as every newer generation does, or every young person that comes through does, redefines what that alternative subculture and space looks like. While Matty and Joshua undeniably raise very interesting points on the commercialization of alternative spaces and art, their clear fixation on the past and the tendency to just dismiss modern expressions of rebellion in youth culture create an obvious generational gap. But I don't think that's a bad thing, because it creates a conversation between the young and the older, who aren't actually that old, just in the schemes of how culture changes so fast within these spaces, but the younger new people coming up painting their way and the older people that did it their own way creates a conversation. I think those conversations are always very interesting to hear both sides of, and I think it's fun and exciting, and that's kind of what I hope to see in the comment section. In truth, if you're new to this channel, I always stress you don't always have to agree with me. I always want this to be a community space where we all share our opinions and thoughts. Just because you disagree with me, I'm never going to get uptight and be like, no, wrong. I'm always interested by hearing the different points of view, and I feel that's what Matty and Joshua could have really used. Someone that just straight up disagreed with their outlook on modern social media and subculture spaces, talking to them. These don't have to be uptight situations where people get really upset and offended just because somebody disagrees with you or doesn't resonate with your point. It can just be oh, okay, that's interesting you see it like that. Let me think about it. Now I'll express my views and opinions on it. But Matty and Joshua's just complete dismantlement and disregard of modern strategies and modern social media and how bands are doing things now, it just seemed shallow and very surface value not really actually exploring any of these places or trying to understand why people are doing it the way they do now. Yeah, but anyway, let's discuss it as a team and a community down in the comment section below right now. I'm excited for this one. You know, Matty Healy's journey from being a destructor to a gatekeeper, I feel, is a reminder that art, culture, and subcultures evolve, even if the previous generations can't always see it. Like I said, I don't always get the new things that are happening in the subculture spaces, but what you can do is if you just try to embrace it and understand it from their lens, from their point of view, it can help bridge the gap between past and present. And I think that's a pretty good thing to do if you want subcultures and counterculture expressions to continue in the long term, which we all do, right? Yeah. Matty, you want that, right? Joshua, you want that, right? Yes, Cal. Good to know. And 2 minutes at a time, someone commented they wanted to see a Dragonite card, so here is my Dragonite card. From the Fossil collection, I think. I remember getting this card when I was like sub 10 years old, and I got it from a friend by using my lunch money to buy the card off of him. I think it was like a week of lunch money. But then I acquired the card. And it's been in my collection and possession ever since. What a beauty, look at the sparkles. And if you are new here and you're like, why is this man going from talking about Matty Healy to Pokemon cards? Well, I've decided to start showing Pokemon cards at the end of my videos just as a fun little way to decompress after talking. So if you've got a favourite Pokemon or Digimon or Yu-Gi-Oh or Doctor Who, I've collected many different types of cards. If you've got a favourite from any of those different genres, let me know and I'll try and find it in one of my collections. Dragonite, you're very cool. I like you. Look at how you sparkle. You big orange dragon dinosaur. I would love to be your friend IRL. Let's connect on LinkedIn. I'll endorse you. You can endorse me. Zooey mama. Anyways, that's me done now. I'm going to go probably like sulk because I had so many quotes for this video and so many different ideas, but there's too much information. I didn't really know how to get it out cohesively. So at least this is hopefully a place where we can have some sort of conversation about it. Yeah, that's probably all I've got to say now though. I've been your boy Cal. Skog's there, of course, by my side, and we shall see you in the comment section and in the next video. Okay, bye.